We have guests from Leipzig today, from the news.de editorial department, and they will speak about their everyday life. They're going to show us some cases. We're going to speak about clicks and figures so that we are able to really get into the nitty-gritty. And we will tell you what news.de does with AX semantics, because there's always the suspicion that we are pure e-commerce, which is inaccurate. We have editorial customers like Opera in Austria, Sarine in Sweden, for instance, and also news.de, who with a team of 5 people are working on and with AX. A lot of editorial content is published. I don't know who is going to speak first. Maybe you want to introduce yourself so that we know who works where, and then I know what question to ask to whom. Christiane, do you want to start? Yes, of course. I'd love to. My name is Christiane. I work for news.de and I'm working with AX. I have been working with AX for a little more than a year, and I'm the data engineer. I do data hunting, and I make sure that the data is available. We use to assess texts via AX and build the trainings. Yes, you have to really dig deep to find the data. You search for data and then you find the piece of data that are hidden somewhere because they are so precious and you don't find them right away. And this is the data you can use later on. Well, I am the one searching for the right topics as a project manager of our team. I'm sure that the team sticks together, that we develop new ideas. And I'm kind of looking over everything. I've been working with news.de for 4 years, but Saim, you and I have been working together for 4 years in the agency and e-commerce business. And I've already carried out numerous projects. And now it's journalism. This is really exciting. How do you identify the things that you want to implement next with AX in your editorial department? Are you looking for the topic first, or are you looking for the data? I mean, this hen and egg problem, how do you solve it? We solve it in many different ways. Sometimes we hit upon a good data source whilst looking for something else. We do have a huge stock of ideas everywhere. And on the other hand, the editorial department tells us we would like to do this or that, but we don't have the time to do so. This is exciting as well. We are a kind of hybrid editorial department. On the one hand, as you've said already, Saim, we have the IX segment with 5 colleagues, and then there's the quote-unquote normal editorial department, and we work for them as well. But in reality, we are 2 separate areas and pillars of the company. And if there's something we can do for our colleagues, we are pleased to do so. And this is why we depend on their input. But we also, as Christiane said, we're also good at searching for sources of data. This is the difference to e-commerce. We don't have our own data. We depend on data sources. We're going to speak about that later on. Again, what kind of source do we use? And we are very transparent with the data sources we consult, and it's easily understandable and seeable where the data is coming from. So let's take COVID as an example. How do you deal with that? That was before I started working for news.de. We realized that the Robert Koch Institute provides us with information. This is low-hanging fruit that we could use. And you can build a map together with other publications and show the incidences. But you could also use SEO keywords and produce a beautiful text in order to process the information and not only mention the pure numbers for the administrative districts. We can also interpret the data, we can show the interpretation and show the bigger picture. we have broken our information down to administrative districts in the context of COVID. So what about the situation in the federal state? As you're saying, usually, so I'm in Germany, it's regulations that there are at federal state level, but there are also cities that have other regulations, and we can use the data we have very well and react to changes very fast. Chrissy, does that mean that the data for the Corona project come from one source, from the Robert Koch Institute? You were already disagreeing. So where's the data coming from if it's not the Robert Koch Institute? What are the sources you use? COVID training is special. A year ago, or 9 months ago, I started developing the training. It was my first AX project with a live potential. And it started with one source of data with the Robert Koch Institute, the incidents, the fatalities, the death rates, etc. This was the first source we used. And then there was Divi, the register for ICU beds. It's not the Robert Koch Institute, it's an independent source. And then there was the difficulty to match the data. So that for every administrative district, now I have the Robert Koch Institute data and the Divi, so the intensive care unit occupancy data. And that was a little bit of work at the beginning, putting this together, but there were other tools that helped us we could use. But yes, there are different sources of data. The COVID text has increased in size considerably per administrative district. It's a long text, a very informative text with a lot of information about the vaccination rate, the regulation in the federal state, the incidences per age group, if there's a rise or a drop, comparison to last week, with different sources of data. I think that the Corona training consists of 7 different sources of data that we're using. And in several instances, the source is the Robert Koch Institute, but the data is stored, saved in different places. You have to retrieve them with a different interface, but they were collected by the Robert Koch Institute. Corona or COVID regulation, there are restaurants, sports facilities, and what rules apply. This is data that also comes from the Robert Koch Institute, but we retrieve them from the Nina Waren app, which is a different app. They deliver information in a format we can use quite easily. And the structures they have, I've heard it already, the DV assigns things and classifies them differently than Robert Koch Institute. In some cases, it's according to district cities, in others, it's the zip code. How can I envisage that? That's very interesting. I also learned that there are municipality codes for the different administrative districts, and this is the matching point that we use for the training. For instance, we have to decide, do we want to connect a new source of data? And the municipality code, can we get it to match it to our 400 districts? If we don't have the match code, it's trickier, and you have to think differently. But in most cases, it's the key indicator for districts. It's the kind of, it's the ID you have to use. Yes, that is very important. All the projects, are they equally important? You have many different projects. When it comes to connectivity of the data, what is the most easiest? I mean, it's great to be able to merge different databases and to write a huge and a very long text, and they rank sensationally. I've double-checked it myself. Stuttgart, what did I enter in Google? Let me think. I entered Stuttgart, Corona, Zahlen, Regeln, numbers and rules. And then right away you find the federal state of Baden-Württemberg, and then Stuttgart ranking third, and at third position, you've got news.de. But are there projects that are easier instead of connecting 7 databases? Well, one thing that's quite easy and is easily understandable for everybody. For football, the Premier League, we also have automated texts. The German Football Association gives us two sets of data, the schedule for the matches so that we can announce the matches when they take place. The schedule is already available at the beginning of the season. We can automate reports, who plays who, where, and then on the day of the match, right after the match, the German Football Association gives us the data, the report about the match. We do that for the Premier League, but also in the regional leagues. And we can generate texts easily about teams you've never heard of. But there are also fans who want to know how they played. Great. So this means there's one table or one database that feeds one text category. That doesn't sound too complicated, although it probably is, but it doesn't sound that difficult in terms of data connection. Can you give us an overview on the published content? So there's the Premier League, the German Premier League, Corona numbers. What else is live? So we have TV announcements for very important shows, and if you miss something, we can stream it. The most popular radio shows, when there was the trial of the 3 candidates for the German chancellorship, there were people who couldn't watch it and they wanted to read about it the other day. So we used the material a second time. So there are preliminary and post-preliminary reports. And then natural thunderstorms, for instance, when there was the flood in North Rhine-Westphalia in summer, we realized that there's a lot of interest. What else? Chrissy, the police reports. This is our press portal. This is a very good example for a live connection. As soon as the press portal communicates something, we use it, and we even rank better than the press portal because we use keywords. The policemen, they hand in their report, they send it to the press portal, and we match it with keywords. And this is really exciting. We want to we can include a certain twist, or we also, in police reports, we also add crime statistics. This is the robbery number, the 10th, the 20th, etc. So we add information. So we've just mentioned 5 or 6 different topics. No, there are more. I think there were more horoscopes. Well, yes, there's also the bio weather. Yes, and we just don't want to speak about things without showing anything. So I'm saying we want to know you, please. Can you please start a screen sharing and show us some examples for some texts. Chrissy, you can show something on the AX platform, and we can show you the way the data set. What does it look like, and where does it go? Before this meeting, when we prepared for the meeting, and during your latest meetup, we noticed that there were critical voices with regard to robot journalism, quote unquote. But as I said before, we are very transparent with our data sources, and we interpret the data properly. It's not a machine that just comes up with anything. We use the AX machine to interpret the data. You can show that quite well, Chrissy. Can you show the data set and what we do with it? Yes, I'd like to share my screen. We'll have a look at our COVID training. I already increased the size a little bit. You see that 15 minutes ago, it was 2 o'clock. We generate text twice per day, at 5 in the morning and 2 p.m. So the afternoon texts have been processed a little while ago. The object is, every object is a district. We also have information on the 16 federal states, but this is for the districts. The UID shows that the municipality codes I've been speaking about, we have them. On the right-hand side, you see the complete data slide with the data that comes in from the different interfaces. It's quite a big bundle. I'm going to scroll down so that you have an idea. I think you can't really read it, but this is the data tree that we use in the AX training. And every district has this bundle of data. I'm not going to dwell on this in detail because it's not that easy to read, but I'm going to show you all the areas that we go through in AX training. It takes a while to load. This is the right mode we are in, where we put together the statements, and in the statements, I process the data fields. Well, this is what it looks like. Here we've got the statements. I've just opened one. You see that there are different titles and branches that, depending on the data, can be triggered. New infections, for instance, or a high number of deaths. There are certain titles that are triggered.
Das ist dann relativ viel. Und ja, man sieht hier auch an der Seite, ne? Also es sind
here you see that there are many different statements because this contains a lot of information. Above, you see what is important for our content management system, so that it can arrive at our website and can be read and depicted properly. And also, there are different number of statements on the current incidence numbers in the district. You see the history. It's not always filled in. If something is red, we see that nothing, you can assume that nothing was delivered from that particular source of data. This is why it's red. And we have included different tables according to the age group, the incidences, number of cases. I mean, there's the hospitality incidents in the different age groups. There are many different pieces of data you can see. And then the number of cases, I mean, you can group things in many different ways. An overview on the occupancy of the intensive care units in the hospitals. And then the vaccination numbers. No, I'm sorry. Here we've got the regulations in different areas, contract restrictions, kindergarten, hospitals. All this is taken over as a hard text from the data source. So here you only quote, right? It also makes sense to take over formulations and not start reformulating or rephrasing it because of search engine optimization purposes. I mean, you also have to make sure that the information is accurate, particularly when it comes to legal matters. It's all based on the regional regulations, and it's good to not change the wording. You're well advised. And we shift things back and forth depending on what is more important. Sometimes the hospitalization incidents shows up first, and the vaccination rate in another instance was showing up first. And you can shift it and change the position depending on what is most relevant for the readers, because the texts have become very long. Chrissy, let's stay there for a moment. That's interesting. You're talking about the vaccination rates, Moderna, Pfizer, AstraZeneca, and Johnson. Today or tomorrow, the first, the new vaccination, Novavax is next, I think. It will be approved. What would you change in this case? Let's assume the database delivers the data and you have to include it. How difficult would it be to adapt this part. I mean, this is like open heart surgery, what we're doing here. How difficult would it be to introduce the data for a new vaccine, and then you have to publish it at almost 900 times per day? Well, it doesn't really matter how often, if it's 900 times, because you only change it once. You only implement the change once here, and then it should be changed in all the other for all the other cases. So what would I do? When the data is delivered, I would have to have an overview whether or not the data is delivered or not, and in what way. And if the corresponding data is delivered, and when I don't have to change a lot, when I have to work the API, I use the transform tab. I map it out, and this gives me a variable that has a number, and then I add it at the right place. For instance, this is a bigger container, and I have pre-formatted it already in this list. And here it would be added. If it was delivered under the same key in the same data field at the same place. Let's assume it is delivered elsewhere and I have to retrieve it from an API, a separate API. I can include it in a statement, but I have to look to see how I can do that in a smart way without ruining everything I have built before. Well, but time-wise, introducing a new vaccine, and let's assume it would be included in the same set of data delivered by Robert Koch Institute or from a different source. How long does it take to include this field of data? If there are no major complications, and if it's easily to see where it has to be put, it doesn't take that long, actually. Let's say, including a double check if it arrived properly in our content management system and if it has been published properly, it takes less than 30 minutes, I'd say. We didn't want to know the minutes, but more or less, that's really fast. So I have two questions that arrived in the Q&As. Let me take the second one first. One of the members of the audience asks, the 900 text, who receives every city, or is the text delivered to 900 newspapers? No, the 900 texts, where do you take them to? The newly published texts, should we go there and have a look at news.de? Because this will allow us to answer the second question that deals with the keywords. We're going to see that in a minute. So 430, 440 texts in the morning and 440 texts in the afternoon. It's all available on your site. And for each administrative district, there's an independent page you update. Well, let me speak about that because Chrissy said 5 a.m. the texts are generated for the first time. Everybody is still sleeping, but the machine is already working. Also during the weekend, that's also very important. In other publishing houses, you would really be typing the whole morning to write such a lot of text, and even let alone the quality. And that we do that twice a day. And at news.de, we publish it right away. And what we see, it was exciting, you mentioned already, Simon, when you look for Stuttgart, the third position is us as a result. And if you have smaller districts even, they don't have their own website. Nobody updates the topics. So this is why we can offer a real added value. We're not talking about the large cities or federated states, but it's the Or Mountain district, for instance. This is where people are happy to find information. And they have pinned us so that in the morning at 6:30, they can already look at our page and have information. This is great. So this is where the 900 texts are put. I hope that this answers the text is not sold on, but you have 430 texts that are online, and twice per day they are updated. So this brings us to roughly 900 pieces of text. Then there was a second very interesting question. How do you automate the integration of keywords? Let's take COVID again. What are the most important keywords in German, and where are they accommodated in the text? And can you also explain how you solve it with the engine so that it's in the right place? Chrissy, can you take that? Or Arne?
Es geht die SEO-Zeilen, oder?
We're talking about the SEO lines. Yes, I've highlighted it already.
Also wir haben unseren Überschriften vorangestellt SEO-Zeilen, in denen
we have SEO lines first, and they include the keywords we coordinated with our SEO team in advance. And this is what you can see in this small headline. And this is also adapted, and there are variances and triggers depending on certain things. We also adapted to the region. When the hospitalization rate was high, or and the vaccinations, so this can vary. And the date and RKI, Robert Koch Institute. So you're cooperating with your SEO team. They tell you what is important, what people enter as search terms, and you adapt it on the fly. You adapt it, and then it's published 430 times a day, multiplied by 2. So again, 900 times. The fun fact is that one colleague from our SEO department is now in our team. She changed over to our team because we used her anyway all the time, and we trained her to use the AX platform so that on a daily basis she can search keywords and update the texts and build independent projects as well. And this is very valuable for us because most of the traffic we have is through search engines. And this is why it's really important to be up to date with our keywords and to use them flexibly. So let's have a look at a project. I don't know if it's the Bundesliga. Well, yesterday there were matches, or 2 days ago there were matches in an event. So the preliminary reports should be there already. There will be no matches next week. But Chrissy, what you can show is the thunderstorm warning, because this is also a good example. Because if you know the German weather forecast station, the DWD, this is our source in this case. It's for the district again. We always want to break it down to the administrative district. Here you see the AX summary, the number of texts. During the weekend, there was no weather, obviously. No, there was no thunderstorm. We also have up to 2,000 texts per year. This is not the weather report. This is just a warning, right? That just means if there's nothing, there were no thunderstorms in Germany. You see how it's decreasing and increasing, like frost. People shall drive carefully. This is a warning, ground frost, for instance. And there are different search intents, and we adapt to that, and we update it every hour. If there is something that the DWD reports, we receive the information every hour. This is what we preset in our system. And you've already shown it. And we have an added value. We don't only show the German forecast data, but also kind of forecast for the next few hours, which we produce, so that the people can see that the weather will be improving or it will not be improving. And we use 2 different sources. Chrissy, it's the Open Weather Map, right? Yes, we use the Open Weather Map as the data source, and they also use the German Weather Service data, the DWD, but they use them in a way that we can use the data better. It's prepared in a way we can use it better. And there's an hourly forecast for the next 7 days. This is something you can get in a way that's more easily readable for us. And it can be matched quite well. So the matching point thing is truly important, particularly if you want to connect different sources of data. In the case of Open Weather Map and the DWD, the German Weather Service, what do you call them? The geo points, they match it through coordinates so that you can cover the right areas. It's a little tricky, but it worked quite well at the end. So we don't only reflect or report the warning, but we also include a special forecast saying the wind will blow X and temperatures will change. So we provide some additional information. And if the weather is going to be better or if it's going to stay as bad as it just is at this point. 2 questions. How do you measure your benefits in terms of traffic and SEO in the context of COVID? How can you show for other departments that your project is successful? Well, we depend on the search engine optimization department. They carry out an excellent reporting because there's an employee who is the text robot, and we assign the texts to him or her, and we can measure the success. And the texts can be found on our website in different results in different segments. We can break it down to the segment, and we can see quite well how many clicks COVID will receive, we get. And this also means our AX team, more of the clicks come from COVID texts. And just to give away a secret, AX in general, 1/3 goes back to it. And this is done in an automated way without us having to do anything. 1/3 comes from AX of our clicks. And this can vary 20 to 30%, but we can build on that. And we're building on that, we're expanding it because every project we have, I mean, in summer, there was a slight decrease in the importance of COVID, but now it's increased again. But on a monthly basis, we have more than 1 million clicks just because of COVID. Just to summarize it, the SEO team measures the success in an independent way. You mentioned the text robot is one author, a member of the editorial department. Are other authors assessed as well? A human being saying you wrote a great article yesterday, or do you only measure the machine? We measure across the board. I mean, quality assurance is important. What topics work well? And this is important in all the different areas, but particularly for us, because we can analyze it to see where can we build upon, what can we expand upon. It was good what we saw with TV. I mean, streaming is also interesting. That was what we've seen. And that's the next thing on our roadmap, is to do streaming. And this is looking towards the future, but this is also important. TV is nice, but it's declining in importance. We have to focus on something else. And by measuring this, this allows us to make statements and plans. So how do you measure? Do you measure the same way human beings and machine-generated text? There is no excuse if you don't perform well just because you're using a machine. I'm going to dwell on the second question now. The limits, I'm going to summarize the question, it's quite long. The AX team, where are your limits? Or where did you get much further than you always thought you would? Can you give an example so as to make it more transparent for the person who asks? Well, for the second question, COVID is just the best example. We realized at the beginning it was worthwhile reporting manually when the topic was still new, and everybody thought that by summer, which summer you're talking about, when it will be over. But then we realized that we can't process all that manually, let alone at that time of the day or during the weekend. And the editorial department, a conventional editorial department, doesn't want to write that many similar texts, but I want to do research and have a content-based approach. And we could support them very well. And the limit we can't exceed as an AX team, so far we were lucky to always get ahead. But it all depends on the data generation. And Chrissy really knows most about it because she has to be hunting the data. And most of the time, we invest our time in finding a reliable data source because we will be measured against that by our users. Because if the data source is a failure, if it's not reliable, we got a problem. And if our data source isn't good from a structural point of view, Chrissy has a problem because she has to prepare the data. Or if the data source is unaffordable, that also happens. That data is offered at a high price, well prepared, it's all nice and beautiful, but we have to make sure that we can afford it or see if we can get the data from elsewhere without having to spend a huge amount of money. And it has to pay off. I mean, how much do we publish? Is it really worthwhile? Is it really worthwhile paying for a source of data? And maybe we're only going to use 5 texts per week. So you always have to strike a balance. And there is also some limit. The cost-benefit ratio, the effectivity, this has to be balanced. Another question, do you use natural language generation models or rather templates for the texts? This is a nice question. Do you want to answer? Should I answer? I can also answer. I feel tempted. Of course you can. You're the expert. I'm the expert. Okay, but that's a little more complicated for those. Well, it's a rule-based system. We have seen already that in the text sample for the thunderstorm or for COVID before, statements are filled in, and it is a system, as you can see here, that's based on rules. And we use neuronal networks to depict it in 110 languages even, it would work. So if news.de will be called news.com one day and wants to publish in 10 languages, we could also support. And it's with the same set of rules that was used here. If the data was available, you could report in Hungarian or in Finnish. I'd like to say thank you to the two of you for showing us what you are working on so frankly, without hiding anything. Thank you very much for being with us. I'd like to wish you all Merry Christmas,